I'm Anita Huberman. I'm CEO of the Surrey Board of Trade, also an honorary captain of the Royal Canadian Navy. Thank you so much for spending this 1 hour with us this afternoon. I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the unceded territory of our Coast Salish people, specifically the Kwantlen, Katzie, Semiahmoo, and Tsawwassen First Nations. Events like this simply do not happen at the Surrey Board of Trade without sponsorship support. Thank you so much to our business and international trade center sponsors, the law firm of Fasken, the Chambers of Commerce Group Insurance Plan, represented by SNF Benefits, and BDC, the Business Development Bank of Canada. I'd like to recognize on the call with us today is Carrie Lynn Finley, Member of Parliament for South Surrey, White Rock. City of Surrey councillors Linda Annis, Brenda Locke, and Stephen Pettigrew. Thank you so much for joining us today. Some instructions before we begin. All attendees are muted. If you do have a question, please put it in the chat function of this technology. And I want to just start off by saying that the Surrey Board of Trade, we are an independent voice of business. We're one of the top 10 largest chambers of commerce, boards of trades in the country. There's 450 of us. We support business, bring business into the city, and we're an independent voice of business, instigating change at the different levels of government, being your concierge of connections during this pandemic and beyond. We have BC's only rapid response business center. And we are one of 9 organizations on the Premier's Economic Recovery Task Force. We're part of the Minister of Economic Recovery's COVID Engagement Industry Task Force, and we have a direct line into the Prime Minister's office, doing the same, identifying gaps and opportunities during this pandemic and beyond. So I know that the topic today at hand is a very important issue, not only for residents, but also for our business community. And today we're here to provide a perspective on policing and public safety in Surrey. Surrey is going to be the largest city in British Columbia. We also know that this is a very emotional issue as well, but we must make sure that we're focusing and moving forward based upon facts. And so we're here to present some of them for you today. We won't be able to respond to absolutely every single concern that you have because it's a very complex transition from the RCMP to a municipal police force, if that should happen. So let's begin. Our speakers today are from the National Police Federation. They are the sole certified bargaining agent representing close to 20,000 members of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police across Canada, including over 850 members in Surrey and over 6,500 members in British Columbia. The National Police Federation is focused on improving public safety in our nation and on increasing resources, equipment, training, and supports as we go through different social and economic changes, and to ensure that they're providing support for their members. From the National Police Federation, I'm so pleased to welcome to the Surrey Board of Trade, President Brian Sauve and board member for the Pacific region, Trevor Dinwoodie. Gentlemen, over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, Anita. Trevor and I are actually honored and pleased to be here and provide a fact-based, evidence-driven approach on a perspective to policing and the Surrey police transition. So we'll see how the technology works. We tested it earlier, and I will try to share my screen, which is a little bit of a presentation for you guys. So just let us know if that worked. And good. Trevor, you're good?
Looks good to me.
Perfect. So obviously the title screen, but then if we move along, we'll give you, Anita gave you a little bit of a heads up there about who the NPF is and where we come from. You know, we are a relatively new organization, certified the Federal Labor Board in July of 2019. We represent pretty close to 20,000 members of the RCMP across Canada and internationally, just under 7,000 in British Columbia, and then about those 853 in Surrey. We are the second largest police association in North America, just behind New York, and the largest in Canada. That red line surrounded section is the important one here. As an organization representing police officers, we're committed to fact-based, research-driven approach to public safety for members and the communities they serve. So you'll see throughout this, just about everything that we talk about, we can back up with evidence that we've been able to garner, as well as data-driven perspectives. The overview of the Surrey RCMP, right? The provincial government has governance over all municipal police contracts through the BC Police Act. And it's been touted a lot that municipalities over 5,000 can choose to contract with the RCMP or can go with the municipal police service of their own. Those that choose to go with the RCMP, if they're over 15,000 in population, receive a subsidy of 10% from the federal government, including Surrey. Should Surrey carry on down this municipal police service road, they will no longer be eligible for that if they have a municipal police service. The contract with the Surrey RCMP was actually started in 1951 through a referendum of its citizens. And the current contract was last renewed on April 1st, 2012, and is now set to terminate at the end of next month, March 31st, 2021. Surrey itself, Trevor, I don't know if you want to speak a bit about this, because Trevor, being a resident of Surrey and having done all of his RCMP service in Surrey, is very, very well versed in all of the effectiveness and what Surrey brings to the table with respect to an RCMP. But some of the best practices and innovations for the RCMP in Canada have come out of Surrey.
Yeah, so thank you for that, Brian. Just by way of biography for me, really quickly, you know, I joined the RCMP and was posted in Surrey in 2003, and I've done my entire career there. You know, most recently working on 135A Street and developing the police mental health outreach team. Surrey is the largest RCMP detachment in the country, and a lot of the best practices come out of Surrey. Surrey is incredibly innovative, progressive, and it really is at the forefront of developing strategies to deal with some of the more complicated community issues that policing, you know, has to deal with. You know, we're engaged with businesses, block watch, crime-free multi-housing, crime prevention, auto crime prevention. We have a flurry, absolute, of youth programs, because we understand that the majority of our issues start, you know, we start to see them manifest themselves in early age. So Surrey has really spent a lot of time in the schools, developing programs to deal with the youth. And I don't know if you knew this, but Surrey RCMP actually puts on the largest youth basketball tournament in Canada. We do that every year. We try to foster relationships with our youth, and it's absolutely an amazing thing to see if you were to come to Surrey Detachment and talk to some of our members.
And obviously the audience here through Anita obviously is a Surrey Board of Trade, so we're most probably speaking to a lot of folks who own businesses. And Trevor, I don't know if you want to talk to the experience he had with respect to homelessness and addiction in different areas of Surrey itself, because that has a massive impact on small business.
Yeah, I think that I can obviously step in now if you want me to. You know, in 2016, I was an operational sergeant at District 1, which is the city center, formerly referred to as the Wally Corps. We saw that the opioid crisis was, climaxing. We were dealing with unprecedented violence at the time, down on 135A Street and in and around that area. And we developed a team. It was put upon me to come up with a action plan and develop a team to, work within that population. Surrey was very progressive in allowing me to start a team that was 24/7 that would be working with our homeless population, and to develop relationships with those people, so that moving forward, we would have that. That was one of the most progressive things that we've ever seen in policing in North America. I've had the honor of presenting in many places about how we conducted that. At that time, it was all about collaboration. We identified, a need to work with health services, to deal with our health authority, to work with BC Housing, to work with the independent social services that were down there. So Lookout Society, the Urban Mission, Night Shift Ministries, Phoenix. And we came up with a collaborative approach, and we had tremendous success. It's actually one of the highlights of my career thus far.
That just gives you an idea of the consultative nature and the ability of the Surrey RCMP to address issues. And as you'll see as we go through this, some of the independent polling and research that we've done of the residents of Surrey over 2020 have shown some priorities that they see. But back to the mandate at hand, is what we are seeing with this particular transition is the lack of a plan, really. And ultimately, you end up with something that you may want, and it seems to be an uphill battle, and it has been an uphill battle for this Surrey transition with respect to cost, with respect to unknowns, with respect to surprises coming out of the woodwork. We've seen a tripling of the transition costs from 19 million to 64 million just recently. Obviously, a residential property tax levy that's been tripled, property tax increases, and many unknown or undisclosed costs. And when at the bottom, when we talk about feasibility study, the PricewaterhouseCoopers report, which was initially done with the assistance of the Vancouver Police Department before any meaningful consultation with residents of Surrey or businesses of Surrey, recommended to the province of British Columbia that a full feasibility study be done to identify a lot of these challenges that are coming up today. That feasibility study was never done. And we're left with what we're left with, and ultimately carrying through with it. So we don't know. We can surmise and we can guess as to what the next few hurdles will be, but there's a lot of unknowns in this transition plan. And you'll see that we've done 4 rounds of research with Polaris Strategic Insights, a very well-respected polling firm with Surrey residents. The sample sizes were about 800 every time. The margin of error is between 3.5 and 3.7%. And across all demographics, all party lines, and all age groups, these are the results that are consistent through all sets of research. So it's clear to us that this is an unwanted plan. And perhaps if the city government had actually done some consultation with its residents and its businesses before doing a transition report, we may be in a different result. However, that didn't happen. And our challenge now, obviously, is the possible inevitable and significant widespread disruption of policing. So when we start talking about recruiting a police service of 800 plus police officers, it's fairly well documented, and my colleagues at different police associations will tell you that every police service in Canada is having a challenge recruiting enough police officers. The career of a police officer is not as desirable anymore as a career as a firefighter or a teacher or a physicist. Kids just aren't growing up thinking cops and robbers and wanting to be the cop. So everyone is having a challenge with recruiting enough police officers. Where do you go to get those 800? In the Lower Mainland, across British Columbia, across nationally, you will have to go most probably to other police services. And that will create a vacuum in an industry or a sector that is already challenged. So if we have 800 police officers leaving the Burnaby RCMP, Coquitlam, Vancouver, New West, Port Moody, West Vancouver, all you're doing is downloading vacancies and challenges to recruiting to other Lower Mainland communities. Then this plan just continues to be in disarray. You know, we've seen some senior officers already hired, their former RCMP. The promise was to have diversity and local knowledge and ability. You know, Chief Norm Lipinski, who I know is a very respected man, and he has all the KSAs to do this job, has been talking about initially that it will be delayed until late 2022. Right now, there's actually no plan, no contract in place for the Surrey RCMP to carry on post March 31st this year. So one has to wonder what that is going to look like. There's a minority of Surrey members who said they would consider transferring. And we've actually done some actuarial analysis. This is a challenge for recruiting, is the RCMP pension plan and the BC Municipal Pension Plan Group 5 are different. There is a transfer agreement between those two pension plans, but me as a member of the RCMP, I do not know what it will cost me or what benefit I will have in the BC Municipal Pension Plan until I resign from the RCMP. So the actuarial analysis that we did was that early and mid-career members of the RCMP, which is the majority of our entire workforce in the RCMP, I'd say almost 70% of our membership across Canada are under 15 years service, would have a cost to them of between $80,000 to $110,000 in order to transfer their service over to the BC Municipal Pension Plan. All of those calculations are individualized and they vary from week to month, depending on how markets do in the RCMP pension plan, as well as the BC Municipal Pension Plan. But these are numbers from December 2020, and they are concerning if you are a police service that is looking to recruit people, because we all know, I spent the majority of my service in the Lower Mainland, and it's expensive to live there, especially when we're talking about junior police officers who are trying to make a life for themselves with their families and their spouses and their children. So could someone come up with an extra $80,000 to $110,000 to keep that service? Or are we only looking at hiring the older police officers who may be going to pension from the RCMP or something else? The Surrey Police Service will not have access to RCMP technology or shared services. This was one of the hits that came out last year, one of those hiccups and surprises. The transition plan thought about a shared service with the RCMP or the Government of Canada, and minimized its cost exposure or projections. The RCMP and shared services has said, no, we're not going to allow you to use our services, which ballooned the IT infrastructure costs. So there are a number of other hiccups coming along the way, which we may see. Trevor, this is yours. This shows the effectiveness of the membership in Surrey.
Yeah, I think it's important that we discuss, what the RCMP has done in Surrey to, combat crime and difficulties that, all communities are facing at this current time. Probably, I would say it's over 5 years ago, the RCMP under Bill 40 and then Dwayne McDonald, made a significant decision at that time to create more community-based services. Looking at, again, I touched upon youth earlier, where we were to, deal with them earlier before problems started. So we've integrated ourselves into elementary schools, developed programs to deal with the youth as we moved forward. Another side of that too is to bring in our own gang task force. Surrey has its own gang task force. They identify, youth coming up that are integrated into gangs. They know who the players are in the community, and they keep a watch on those. Another side of that too was obviously the development. Something I'm very proud of was the Surrey outreach team. We had an opioid crisis in 2016. We were seeing unprecedented violence in North Surrey. And we developed the Surrey outreach team, which further became the police mental health outreach team. I mean, these are all strategies that Surrey, incredibly progressive and innovative at the time, came up with to combat, some of these crimes. And it shows in the data. It just shows in the stats.
It does, and for the audience's benefit, one of the things the National Police Federation is about advertising all of the good work that the membership of the RCMP do across Canada and internationally. So this slide in front of you is something that we did the research on. It's all publicly available data, but it had never been compiled into one area and a comparison. And it amazed me. It amazed our communications team to show how effective the Surrey RCMP has been with the resources and the mandate that they've been given. And one can only imagine how effective they would be should the additional police officers they had asked for over the last 2 to 3 years, and should an increase in budget or consultation between the officer in charge and the community have taken place. So we want to advertise the fact that our membership there are extremely dedicated, extremely professional, and extremely committed to the safety of residents of Surrey. And going into the next slide, it also shows you a little bit more about how much the Surrey RCMP is of value to the membership, to the public in Surrey. They are doing more with less. And that number there about the Surrey is growing by about 1,000 residents per month. As Anita mentioned earlier, they will soon be the largest city in British Columbia. And you have to wonder if the resources provided to the Surrey RCMP, or the $64 million or the 25% budget cut to the Surrey RCMP this year were reinstated, and the money towards transition were either allocated towards other community initiatives or some towards the RCMP, and some good consultation about priorities were taken, how effective that they could be. We can talk a little bit about how this is not a done deal. And I know there's been a lot of discussion about the fact that this is finished, it's over with. They've hired a chief, boom, done, exit stage left and such. From our perspective, the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General has the ongoing authority here and the ongoing responsibility. Ultimately, they are responsible, and their office is responsible for the safety of all British Columbians, regardless of the size of community, regardless of the size of police service, and regardless of the stripe on the pants. Hence why the approval was granted from that office, and the transition plan has gone through all of these red, green, and yellow lights through the Minister of Public Safety. So we've already talked a little bit about training and recruiting. Just bring up the fact that the other challenge with a municipal police service in British Columbia is obviously the Justice Institute of BC, which has always been underfunded. And there is actually no plan in place to increase the funding or the resources provided to the JIBC, especially in a COVID-rich environment where even us with our depot training facility have had to modify how training happens, and we cannot put out the maximum number of cadets that we had identified. So that is a challenge. There's no plan identified yet for integrated services. right? Whether it's IHIT, whether it's the emergency response team, underwater recovery, you know, we could go on. We could talk about Air One and the fleet of helicopters and planes. We could talk about the integrated road safety unit. We could talk about all of those integrated pieces, not to mention the Surrey RCMP share of the Green Timbers headquarters facility and the impacts that what are we going to do without these integrated services, or are we going to develop our own with the Surrey Police Service, and the downloading of costs of Surrey's share of that Green Timbers facility to other municipalities, or does Surrey maintain a part of that? You know, at the bottom, we talk about an 18-month delay so far. Who knows how much longer this delay will happen? Trevor, any thoughts on integration and specialized teams?
No, I think it's obviously the proof is in the pudding, right? These teams have been incredibly aggressive, being out there dealing with the situations. Vast majority of municipal forces are obviously seeing the how positive they can be, and they're joining them. You know, obviously there is a connection and a cost savings when you work with the RCMP. Thanks.
We, our communications team and our IT team decided to have a little bit of fun on this website, and they've created this broken promise countdown going to April 1st, 2021, which was supposed to be the go live date for the Surrey Police Service. So this slide will tell you what you can do ultimately is, you know, surreysayonpolicing.com is the webpage that we've developed for this. It will provide you as much fact as we've been able to garner thus far and update it regularly. There's also the ability to send an email to your local MLA and councillor through that webpage and speak about your concerns publicly. You can follow us on Facebook and get those updates through that. If you have your phone with you, and most of us have the Facebook or the webpage app, or you know, we have these smartphones today, feel free to have a look at it right now and take a peek. We will leave you with, and hopefully this works, a little bit of a video that we.
Mayor Doug McCallum has the wrong priorities for taxpayers and policing in Surrey. Surrey still has COVID-19 impacts, job losses, business closures, major project delays, and big property tax hikes. But Mayor McCallum and his majority council are still trying to build an expensive and unnecessary new police force, putting himself in charge. And now, in 2021, his plan is completely out of control and full of broken promises. Transition costs have more than tripled from $19 million to $64 million. Surrey residents oppose his plan and want to keep the RCMP. And we keep discovering more and more hidden costs, meaning the new police department will have less police for more money. Thanks to Mayor McCallum, taxes could increase by 11% to pay for the new police department, including a tripling of the homeowner levy from $100 to $300 per homeowner. This is money that should be invested in transit, community centers, and support for our most vulnerable. With so many problems, broken promises, and delays, this plan is not a done deal. Say no to Doug McCallum's expensive, unnecessary, and chaotic police transition. And let's get back to focusing on what really matters to the people of Surrey. Find out more at surreysayonpolicing.com. Mayor Doug McCallum.
There we go. Sorry, sometimes I'm technologically challenged. And Anita, thank you very much. So I'll stop screen sharing, but any questions that anybody might have, we can try and answer.
Thank you so much, Brian and Trevor. And the video was a little hard to hear, but we'll have the presentation on our website at businessinsurrey.com and send it out to the attendees as well. Ladies and gentlemen, I also want you to know that, many of the following questions will also be asked when we have our event with the new Surrey Police Service Chief Constable Norm Lipinski on May 11th at 12 p.m. So you can acquire both perspectives. But to Brian and Trevor, you can respond to the following questions in terms of knowledge. And my first question to you, based upon what you know, is the transition approved by the BC government?
Trevor, is the transition approved by the BC government?
Yeah.
As far as we're aware, yes. You know, the initial transition report by PricewaterhouseCoopers went forward, which gave a green light to do what is called the HOPO report, which showed a number of hypotheses and assumptions with respect to what a transition will look like. And yes, the transition is approved, which means the contract for the RCMP will end March 31st, 2021. And what that looks like, what policing looks like in Surrey post that, nobody knows.
So what will the cost impacts be to the BC budget from your perspective? The BC budget is coming down on April 20th. We just had a meeting with BC's finance minister and certainly, indicated that there will be cost impacts to British Columbia's budget. What's your perspective on that?
Good question. That's a question that's best directed to the finance minister of British Columbia, but there are implications to moving away from the RCMP. So every municipality that contracts with the RCMP benefits from economies of scale. And those are things like the Lower Mainland Emergency Response Team is integrated, as well as the division administration budget. So those who are on family-related leave, maternity, paternity, long-term absences, long-term illnesses, one detachment, one municipality does not share the burden of that one police officer. It's shared amongst the entire province. What is that going to look like? Don't know. It's going to go, the costs for neighboring municipalities and the BC RCMP communities will go up. I mentioned earlier the cost for the Green Timbers headquarters facility is shared amongst other municipalities. What does the impacts of Surrey leaving the RCMP have to other municipalities in the province with respect to that $1 billion facility? Don't know. No one's been able to really give us an answer. So really the Minister of Finance is the one who should be targeted with those questions.
So it's the end of February. The RCMP contract ends at the end of March. We're in the business of ensuring public safety for our business community and bringing business into the city in a safe way where people can live, learn, work, and play. Can it be done in a month where that RCMP contract is extended?
Trevor?
Well, I mean, I guess I don't know the underlying the underlying agreement that's going on currently. I can say I believe there's a gentleman's handshake to continue to for the RCMP to continue to work. Again, it just speaks to all the unknowns of what's going on and why we, as citizens of the city, don't know more.
Will a different policing model decrease gang activity? And we know crime is regional, it's borderless. Business is borderless. But is a new model actually going to decrease that gang activity that we've been seeing for the past couple of months?
Again, it's like Trevor, this is an awesome question for you. You know, as you said, Anita, crime is borderless. You know, the whether it's the BC RCMP or the British Columbia government, we have the Combined Forces Special Enforcement Unit, dedicated the Integrated Gang Task Force Unit, which is all police services leading together to combat that borderless crime. But, you know, Trevor, you can speak to the Surrey experience specifically. You mentioned that Surrey has its own gang enforcement team and is very, very community focused and community led.
Yeah, I mean, the crime in the Lower Mainland, to say that a municipal force is going to solve it is a bit of a pipe dream, quite frankly. Currently right now, the RCMP has many integrated services throughout the Lower Mainland. Surrey itself has its own community-based programs, its own Surrey gang enforcement section. And, they are able to keep an eye on who is in and out of our community. And, I think it's a broader question, something that, Brian and I cannot answer.
So right now, in phases, civilian staff are being transferred slowly to the new Surrey Police Service. What are your thoughts on that process as we go through 2021?
I mean, it's a shell game, really. I'm not saying they're trying to disillusion people, but it's no different within the RCMP or any organization. You have employees of the City of Surrey that are being moved over or reclassified to be employees of the Surrey Police Service. So that will happen. That will go on. It's still the same employer, City of Surrey, just through the police board.
Sophisticated IT equipment, infrastructure, all of those pieces, the expenses related to that, and some money's been spent already as it relates to the Surrey Police Service. Do you think this IT and all the infrastructure that's required to ensure a state-of-the-art center of excellence, public safety infrastructure, can that be done by the end of 2022?
I'm no expert on that. I can tell you, having started an organization the size of the National Police Federation, and over the last year and a half or so, we've been working on IT and infrastructure and human resource management software plans. It's not, even as a private organization that doesn't have to consult with taxpaying public with respect to how we proceed. It is a long process to get the right vendors, to get the right solution implemented. I can only imagine how difficult and challenging and expensive. One of the estimates for IMIT for the Surrey Police Service was in excess of $40 million. It would be for a police service. You have to remember that the data integrity that they are trying to protect is massive. The same with us. The data integrity that we're trying to protect is data of serving police officers. So you need the encryption, you need the ability to protect victims of crime who are reporting a crime from any external cyber threat, as well as you need to be able to dispatch your police officers knowing that information is confidential and is not being heard or scanned by the media, who are going to show up at a crime scene ahead of you because they heard it on their scanner. So there's a lot to putting together a professional police service in 2021, and a lot of consideration that needs to be put to that, which all comes at a cost.
You know, in Surrey, our geography is where you can fit the cities of Vancouver, Burnaby, Richmond into our city limits. And as I said before, we're growing by 1,400 people a month. How many officers, in your opinion, should be in Surrey today on the ground?
Well, you're going to get a biased opinion, and Trevor may speak to this, but I have always thought, when I was working, whether it's in North Vancouver and Burnaby or out in Green Timbers, the size of Surrey So yeah, okay, the population is not as big as Vancouver, but the geographic area is 5 times the size. So you go to a barking dog complaint or a domestic in progress, you may have 5 times the distance to cover. So your police officer per population should be equivalent to, if not greater than, a city like Vancouver or Delta or Port Moody. And we are not there. Right now, they're operating, when I spoke about the capacities and the impact the Surrey RCMP has had on crime rates and quality of life and crime severity index, and doing it with far less than their municipal comparators. They're operating, I think, at about 276 police officers per 100,000 population, or per 1,000 population, my apologies. And your Vancouvers are operating at about 400 to 450. So think about that. I would say, comparatively speaking, if you want broad numbers, a city like Surrey should be anywhere between 11 and 1,300 police officers.
You know, trust, especially in business, is built over time. And with a new infrastructure, a new public safety infrastructure, how do you think trust is going to be built by the population, by the business community with the new Surrey Police Service? And keeping in mind, we have the most number of refugees within British Columbia that come to Surrey. We have a growing immigrant population. 104 different languages are spoken in our city. How is trust? Is trust even important in this? Tell me your perspective on that.
I'll give you some brief stats on this, but Trevor can speak to it. You know, as police officers, the only thing we have is our credibility. And I know that the Surrey RCMP right now is extremely diverse. They speak over 51 different languages, and almost 15% of their membership there speak a South Asian language. And a lot of their senior leadership are extremely ethnically diverse, fairly reflective of the community of Surrey. Trevor, do you want to talk about trust and especially in communities, vulnerable communities?
Yeah, I mean, I will echo Brian's comments extensively. Trust is absolutely everything for policing. When we integrate ourselves into a community and we are dealing with some of the most marginalized, vulnerable people, we need to develop trust. That was the entire focus of my project on dealing with 135 A Street in North Surrey. It was developing trust with that population so that they knew that police officers were there to assist them and not there to arrest them and marginalize them. So, Mr. Lipinski, Chief Lipinski, is going to have a difficult job ahead of him. But I think if any police organization, regardless of the RCMP, municipal, provincial, I mean, that is going to be paramount in what they need to do to establish relationships.
So is the next step for the Surrey Police Service to have a feasibility study as set out by council? You know, what from your perspective is the next step?
The next step regarding what? Sorry, the next step if I were Chief Lipinski, or the next step if I was the community?
Yeah, well, I mean, the Surrey Police Board, you know, they govern the Surrey Police Service today. And so is the next step, in order to receive final approval from the province and the Solicitor General, to have that feasibility study in place?
Well, I don't think the police board is going to do that. They have kind of ignored the information that we've provided, the data we've provided, the residents' concerns thus far. But if I were the chair of the police board or a member of that police board, I would perhaps want that feasibility study done. And at the same time, if I were the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General, perhaps that's something that I'm worried about for all British Columbians, especially in the Lower Mainland, not to mention the residents of Surrey, that adequate policing and public safety services are going to be provided through this transition. So I might order that feasibility study. And the minister has been a little hot potato-ish on this issue, where it's like, no, it's the community's decision. They can proceed. The minister has nothing to do with this. We've approved the transition. You know, I just want to remind everybody that back in 2019, Minister Farnworth interfered with the Victoria City Police Service and actually ordered them to hire more police officers to police the community of Esquimalt. And his predecessor back in 2011, Shirley Bond, when the city of Esquimalt, a city over 5,000 residents, voted to move towards the RCMP, Minister Bond said, no, you can't do that. You will stay with the Victoria City Police. So for the minister to sit back and say it's entirely a community's decision or a mayor's decision is kind of up in the air, and they can interfere and intercede at any point in time, and they can stop this transition at any point in time.
I just wanted to shift a little bit to gain both of your perspectives on the duties on the ground of a public safety officer. And, you know, the other health crisis that's happening concurrent with COVID-19 is the opioid crisis. Can you give the audience an idea of, you know, there's so many things that public safety officers, police officers have to deal with. So as it relates to the opioid crisis, going through a huge transition, how is that going to impact cities?
Well, Trevor, you can speak to it on the ground, but you know, it came up 2 weeks ago when the province released their numbers of the opioid crisis last year. A little over 1,700 people died as a result of that crisis. So put it in comparison to our COVID deaths, both serious public health emergencies, and how are we allocating as Canadians and as British Columbians our resources to those crises? Trevor?
Yeah, I think it's very important that we address mental health and addiction is one of the key principles that we are dealing with as police officers as we move into this new era. It's something that I take very passionately. Something that I a lot of my career based working in North Surrey, dealing with marginalized populations, vulnerable populations. And until we have a full scale shift and we eliminate the silos of, our health authorities, and we start to work with our justice systems and the policing, we are really going to be ineffective in addressing that problem. We have taken incredibly broad steps, innovative steps in the RCMP to deal with it. We were the first police organization to step up and actually address harm reduction and actually support it, looking at supervised consumption as something that was saving lives. We were the first organization to actually, supply our people with naloxone to use on, the outside population. So these are all things that we did as an organization to move forward. As we progress, I really think it's a federal, provincial, and municipal issue where we start to look at addiction, mental health as what it is, a health concern. It's a progressive, it's a escalating, and if not treated, a terminal disease. And we really aren't putting the funds behind it to address it the way we should. We should have treatment on demand. Our court systems should be following people from cradle to grave that are dealing with addiction to ensure that they are, they're following, their treatment plans. We're not doing that. And all we do is we see this revolving door where people are released, they're back on the street, and they're committing petty crimes or they're in crisis. And it is left to first responders, police, fire, EHS to deal with. And we are at a critical tipping point right now where we need to address that.
So if done right, with all of the consultation and the research and all of that, some critics have been saying, what about a regional policing model? What's your perspective on that within Metro Vancouver?
That's an interesting idea, and I know it's been bandied about for a number of years. And I think, who knows, really, should a regional policing model be effective? It could. Would it be more effective than the model you have today? I don't know. Someone would have to really engage all the stakeholders, all of the communities, and be a part of that. I remember being part of the North Shore Policing Review, and one of the recommendations out of that was that West Vancouver Police perhaps amalgamate with the North Vancouver RCMP or with the Vancouver Police Department. But West Vancouver residents were very tied and very proud of their police service, and they wanted and liked to maintain an independent police service. So that's what they chose to do. So it's part of an identity of a community, and really you have to engage those communities to determine where they want to go versus just making a unilateral decision.
Will Surrey's police transition affect policing and public safety in cities in British Columbia or throughout Canada? What's your perspective on that?
Well, I think our perspective is the police transition, if the plan is to have it up and fully operational by the end of 2022, will destabilize policing in the Lower Mainland. You will have residents of Vancouver that will be waiting longer for police officers to show up. You'll have residents in Port Moody, New West, Transit, who are waiting longer for police officers to show up because the vacancies in those police services will not be filled by cadets because of the recruiting challenges and the ability and the lack of ability to train at the JIBC.
My final question to you, and then I'll ask you for closing remarks, is what about the partnerships with not-for-profits? For example, in Surrey, Sophie's Place, domestic abuse victims, child abuse victims, other not-for-profits that partner with the RCMP and the great services and results that they provide on the ground. Will that continue under a Surrey Police Service paradigm?
Trevor, I got to throw that one over to you because you are on the ground in Surrey, and you can speak to it.
Yeah, well, again, I'm sorry to do this, but I mean, that would be it would be an excellent question for Chief Lipinski. Obviously, the RCMP has developed those relationships over a number of years. We're heavily engaged with Sophie's Place. We're heavily engaged with Lookout Society. We're heavily engaged with the Surrey Urban Mission, Night Street Ministries. So that's something that you're looking at an operational plan moving forward for the Surrey Police Service. I would hope that's something that would be on their agenda. That's where I'd have to say.
Well, I'm going to leave it there. We've received over 100 questions today. So we'll leave it to you for closing remarks, and we'll begin with Brian and then over to you, Trevor.
Well, I just have to thank you for the opportunity, Anita. I'm trying slowly going through the chat for the questions in between questions. Feel free to send those to us, and those that we didn't get to, we can give you a response back that you can share with your attendees. And I think it's from our perspective. One last comment from me would be that we're not here to protect jobs. Right? Obviously, we're a labor organization and we don't want to see a reduction in our workforce, but our membership in Surrey, should this transition carry forward, will be able to provide policing services in the RCMP elsewhere in the Lower Mainland or throughout British Columbia, and we will help them get there. So we're not looking at losing jobs. What we're looking at is a transition plan that doesn't take into account the needs for public safety of Surrey residents. And all cops sign up for public safety and to serve their fellow Canadians. This particular transition plan is not doing a good job of that and is putting at risk public safety within British Columbia, the Lower Mainland, and specifically Surrey. So thank you for the opportunity, and look forward to further discussion.
Trevor?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Obviously, my heart is near and dear to Surrey. I live in Surrey. I was virtually raised here, and I've done all my service here. I can speak to the fact that as RCMP officers, we are born, raised, and work within our community. And I just want to thank you for the opportunity today to deliver this presentation. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian and Trevor, for being with us here at the Surrey Board of Trade, where we are together making Surrey an opportunity city. Ladies and gentlemen, check out www.businessinsurrey.com for all of our programs and services. And thank you everyone for attending. Make it a great business day.